Elena Blackwood, 31, standing outside the grand ballroom of the Riverside Country Club, watching through crystal windows as my younger sister dances with her new husband. 10 years of silence broken by an elegant invitation that arrived at my FBI field office last month. 10 years since I walked out of our family mansion with nothing but a duffel bag and burning rage. 10 years since my own family chose money and reputation over me. Now I'm back, and they have no idea that the scared teenager who fled in the night has become Special Agent Victoria Blackwood, and I'm here to destroy everything they built on lies and corruption. If you've ever felt powerless against people who seemed untouchable, this story is for you. Drop a comment about where you're watching from. I want to know my story is reaching people who understand what it's like to fight for justice against impossible odds. Let me take you back to where this all began, to the night that changed everything and set me on a path toward this moment of reckoning. I grew up in Beacon Hill, Massachusetts, in a world where old money whispered through mahogany-paneled rooms and family legacy mattered more than individual conscience. Our Georgian colonial mansion, with its perfectly manicured gardens and circular driveway, sat like a monument to respectability. But beneath the polished surface, our family harbored secrets dark enough to destroy everything we claimed to represent. My father, Charles Blackwood, was a federal judge on the First Circuit Court of Appeals. For 30 years, he had been the face of judicial integrity, his decisions shaping legal precedent across New England. His study walls were lined with awards for judicial excellence, honorary degrees from Harvard and Yale, and photographs with presidents and Supreme Court justices. My mother, Vivian, was the perfect judge's wife, educated at Wellesley, fluent in 3 languages, and capable of hosting diplomatic dinners with effortless grace. My sister Emma was born when I was 4, and from the moment she arrived, I adored her completely. I taught her to read before she started school, braided her dark hair every morning, and fiercely protected her from playground bullies. We built fairy houses in our garden, shared secrets under my purple comforter, and promised each other we'd always be sisters no matter what happened. "Vicky," she would whisper during thunderstorms as she crawled into my bed, "promise we'll never let anyone come between us." "I promise, Em," I would reply, holding her close. Sisters forever. But even in childhood, I sensed the undercurrents of tension that ran through our supposedly perfect family. My father's late nights weren't always spent reviewing cases. My mother's charity work often involved private meetings with wealthy donors that lasted far too long. There were hushed phone conversations that stopped when I entered rooms, envelopes of cash hidden in my father's desk drawer, and a general atmosphere of secrets that no one acknowledged but everyone felt. The first crack in our family facade appeared when I was 15. I was supposed to be at a sleepover, but when my friend got sick, I came home early to find my father in his study with Marcus Delacroix, a notorious defense attorney known for representing organized crime figures. They were counting stacks of $100 bills while discussing case timelines and jury selection strategies. "The Torino verdict needs to come down a certain way," Delacroix was saying as I watched from the hallway. "The family has invested considerable resources in ensuring the right outcome." My father nodded, sliding an envelope across his desk. "Judge Morrison has already been approached. The appeal will be granted, and the conviction overturned on a technicality." I stood frozen in horror as I realized what I was witnessing. My father, the pillar of judicial integrity, was taking bribes to fix cases. When I accidentally knocked over an umbrella stand, both men spun toward the sound. My father's face went through a series of expressions: shock, fear, and finally cold calculation. "Victoria," he said with deadly calm, "come here." The next 10 minutes changed my relationship with my father forever. Instead of explaining or apologizing, he grabbed my arm hard enough to leave bruises and explained exactly what would happen if I ever spoke about what I had seen. "You will never repeat what you think you heard," he said, his voice containing a threat I had never heard before. "Because if you do, this family will be destroyed. Your mother will lose everything. Emma's future will be ruined. And you'll discover that judges have friends in very dark places who don't appreciate their business being disrupted." When I tried to protest, tried to argue that what he was doing was wrong, he slapped me across the face, so hard my ears rang. "You're 15 years old," he hissed. You understand nothing about how the world really works. Nothing about the compromises necessary to maintain the life you've always enjoyed. You will keep your mouth shut, and you will be grateful for the opportunities this family provides. That night, I lay in bed with ice on my cheek, trying to process what I had learned. The father I had idolized was corrupt. The judicial system I had been taught to respect was for sale. The comfortable life I had always known was built on crime and betrayal. Over the next 3 years, I began to notice things I had previously overlooked. Certain cases my father handled where the outcomes seemed predetermined. Expensive vacations that coincided with major verdicts. Prominent criminal defendants who walked free despite overwhelming evidence. My father's increasing paranoia about phone calls and visitors. Emma and I responded to this toxic environment in opposite ways. I became rebellious and questioning, researching legal precedents to understand exactly how my father was manipulating the system. I challenged his authority, refused to participate in family social events, and made it clear I saw through his performance of integrity. Emma doubled down on being the perfect daughter. She excelled academically, joined all the right clubs, dated appropriate boys from good families, and never asked uncomfortable questions. She basked in our father's approval while I received increasingly cold treatment. Why do you have to make everything so difficult? Emma would ask me after I'd had another confrontation with our father. Just follow the rules and everything would be fine. Because the rules are fake, I would reply. Can't you see what he really is? But Emma didn't want to see. She preferred the comfortable lie to the ugly truth. The breaking point came during my senior year of high school. I was 18 and had been accepted to Georgetown with plans to study criminal justice, a choice that infuriated my father, who wanted me to pursue something less controversial. One evening, I overheard him on a phone call discussing a case involving a young mother accused of drug trafficking. The evidence was circumstantial, and she claimed innocence, but the prosecution was pushing for maximum sentencing. What I heard next made my blood run cold. The Ramirez case needs to result in conviction, my father was saying. 25 to life, no possibility of parole. The client is very specific about sending a message to the community. I realized he was talking about Maria Ramirez, a single mother whose case had been all over the local news. Her children would grow up without their mother because my father was being paid to ensure her conviction regardless of guilt or innocence. Something inside me snapped. I couldn't remain silent while an innocent woman was sent to prison for life to line my father's pockets. That night, I drafted an anonymous letter detailing everything I knew about my father's corruption and mailed it to the FBI Boston field office, the state attorney general, and 3 major newspapers. The letter included specific dates, amounts of money I had observed, names of attorneys and cases involved, and details about the hidden safe in my father's study where he kept records of his transactions. I signed it simply as a concerned citizen and mailed it from a post office across town. For 2 weeks, nothing happened. I began to think my letter had been dismissed as the work of a crank. Then, on a Tuesday morning, FBI agents arrived at our house with search warrants. I watched from my bedroom window as federal agents carried boxes of evidence from my father's study. My mother stood in the foyer, her face white with shock. Emma clung to her, crying and demanding to know what was happening. My father was led away in handcuffs, maintaining his dignity even as his world collapsed around him. The media attention was immediate and devastating. Federal judge arrested in corruption scheme. Beacon Hill family's dark secrets exposed. Judicial integrity shattered by bribery scandal. That evening, as our house was surrounded by news vans and curious neighbors, my mother confronted me in the kitchen. "This was you," she said, her voice trembling with rage. "You destroyed this family." I had prepared for this moment, but facing her accusations still felt like a physical blow. "He was innocent people," I said. "He was selling justice to criminals. He was providing for this family," she screamed. "Do you think this house, your education, your opportunities just appeared out of nowhere? Everything we have came from those connections." Emma appeared in the doorway, her face streaked with tears. "What's Mom talking about? What did you do?" For a moment, I hesitated. This was my chance to tell her everything, to help her understand why I had made this choice. But before I could speak, my mother cut me off. Your sister betrayed us, she said coldly. She chose strangers over family. She chose to destroy everything we built rather than keep our private business private. That's not true, I protested. I chose justice over corruption. I chose what was right over what was profitable. Emma looked between us, confusion and hurt warring in her expression. Vicky, is it true? Did you call the FBI on Dad? The way she asked the question, as if I had committed the ultimate sin, broke my heart. Yes, I said quietly, because what he was doing was wrong. He's our father. Emma cried. How could you do this to our family? How could I let him keep destroying other families? I shot back. My mother's expression hardened into something I had never seen before. You have a choice, Victoria. You can publicly recant your accusations. Claim you were confused, upset, that you misunderstood what you saw. Help us rebuild what you've destroyed. Or, I asked, though I already knew, or you leave this house tonight and never come back. Your trust fund will be frozen. Your college tuition will not be paid. Your name will be removed from our will. As far as this family is concerned, you will no longer exist. I looked at Emma, silently pleading for support. But she was looking at her mother with desperate hope. Please, Vicky, Emma whispered. Just say you made a mistake. We can fix this. I didn't make a mistake, I said, my voice breaking. And I won't lie to help cover up crimes. My mother nodded as if this confirmed her worst expectations. Then pack your things. I want you gone within the hour. I stood in my childhood bedroom for the last time, throwing clothes and essentials into a duffel bag while my family waited downstairs for me to leave. I packed the few photos I couldn't bear to lose, including one of Emma and me building a snowman the previous winter. I left behind my laptop, my jewelry, my books, anything that could be taken away as easily as it had been given. When I came downstairs with my bag, my father was back from being processed and released on bail. He stood in our foyer, still wearing his judge's robes, looking older than I had ever seen him. You have 30 seconds to say whatever you need to say, he told me. Then you leave and never contact this family again. I looked at each of them one final time. My mother, rigid with anger and disappointment. My father, cold and calculating even in defeat. Emma, crying but offering no words of support or love. I hope someday you'll understand that I did this because I love what our family was supposed to represent, I said. Justice. Integrity. Doing what's right even when it's hard. What we represented, my father replied, was power. Influence. The ability to shape outcomes. You threw all of that away for abstract principles that mean nothing in the real world. They mean everything, I said. And someday, when you're sitting in a prison cell, you'll understand that. I walked out the front door into a cold October night, 18 years old with a duffel bag and $67 in my wallet. Behind me, I could hear Emma sobbing and my mother trying to comfort her. No one came after me. No one called my name or asked me to reconsider. The first 6 months were the hardest period of my life. I slept in homeless shelters when space was available, on park benches when it wasn't. I worked at a 24-hour diner, cleaning tables and washing dishes for minimum wage plus whatever tips customers were generous enough to leave. I showered at a YMCA where I had traded cleaning services for a membership. Some nights, huddled in doorways trying to stay warm, I wondered if I had made a terrible mistake. My family was living in their mansion while I was struggling to find enough food to eat. They had heat and comfort while I was learning which subway tunnels stayed warmest overnight. But then I would remember Maria Ramirez, the young mother whose life my father had been willing to destroy for money. I would think about all the innocent people who had been convicted while guilty criminals walked free because of judicial corruption. And I would find the strength to keep going. The turning point came when I met Agent Sarah Chun at the FBI Boston field office. I had gone there to follow up on my father's case, wanting to ensure the investigation was proceeding properly. Agent Chun was the lead investigator, and when she realized I was the anonymous tipster who had started the entire investigation, she took a personal interest in my situation. You did something incredibly brave, she told me over coffee in the FBI cafeteria. Most people would have stayed quiet to protect their own comfort. Most people don't have to watch their fathers sell justice to the highest bidder, I replied. Agent Chen studied me for a moment. What are you planning to do with your life now? I had been thinking about that question constantly. I want to work in law enforcement. I want to make sure people like my father can never hurt innocent people again. Have you considered the FBI? She asked. We need agents who understand corruption from the inside. People who have seen how systems can be manipulated and who are committed to preventing it. That conversation changed everything. Agent Chen helped me apply for federal financial aid to attend community college while working. She became my mentor, guiding me through the complex process of preparing for a career in federal law enforcement. She made sure I understood the academic requirements, the physical training demands, and the psychological challenges of the work. For 2 years, I lived in a tiny studio apartment and worked 3 jobs while completing my associate degree with honors. Then I transferred to Boston University, where I studied criminal justice and psychology while maintaining perfect grades and participating in internships with local law enforcement agencies. Agent Chen checked in regularly, offering advice and encouragement. The FBI doesn't just want smart people, she told me. We want people with integrity. People who will do the right thing even when it costs them everything. During my junior year, my father's trial finally began. I testified as a government witness, describing what I had observed and heard over the years. Facing him across a courtroom was one of the most difficult experiences of my life. He stared at me with such hatred that I felt physically sick. His defense attorney tried to paint me as a disturbed young woman seeking attention and revenge. But the physical evidence I had helped the FBI locate was overwhelming. Financial records, recorded conversations, testimony from other witnesses who had been too afraid to come forward until my initial report gave them courage. Charles Blackwood was convicted on 17 counts of judicial corruption, bribery, and conspiracy. He was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. The judge who sentenced him noted that his crimes had struck at the very foundation of our legal system and shown a complete disregard for the sacred trust placed in judicial officers. I watched from the gallery as they led him away in shackles. My mother and Emma sat on the other side of the courtroom, both crying. Emma looked over at me once, her expression unreadable, but she didn't approach or acknowledge me in any way. After graduation, I was accepted into the FBI Academy at Quantico. The training was brutal, physically, mentally, and emotionally demanding. But every time I wanted to quit, I remembered why I was there. I thought about all the corrupt officials who believed they were above the law, all the innocent people who needed someone to fight for them. I excelled at the academy, graduating second in my class and earning commendations for leadership and investigative skills. My first assignment was to the Boston field office, working under Agent Chen on public corruption cases. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was investigating the same type of crimes my father had committed. Over the next 8 years, I built a reputation as a thorough and fearless investigator. I specialized in cases involving judicial corruption, police misconduct, and political bribery. My understanding of how these systems worked from the inside made me particularly effective at recognizing patterns and building cases that would stand up in court. I worked my way up to senior special agent, then to a supervisory role overseeing a team of investigators. My colleagues respected my dedication and my ability to see connections others missed. I had found my calling in bringing down people who believed their power made them untouchable. During those years, I occasionally saw news about my family in Boston's social pages. My mother had retreated from public life, but maintained her position in certain charity organizations. Emma had graduated from Wellesley with honors and married Derek Ashford, heir to a pharmaceutical fortune. They appeared to be living the perfect upper-class life I had once been destined for. I never reached out to them, and they never tried to contact me. As far as they were concerned, Victoria Blackwood had died the night I walked out of their house. In some ways, she had. The woman I became was harder, more focused, driven by a mission that consumed most of my personal life. But then, last month, an elegant cream envelope arrived at my office. Inside was an invitation to Emma's second wedding. Apparently her first marriage had ended in divorce, to Senator William Morrison's son, James Morrison III. The ceremony would be held at the Riverside Country Club, one of the most exclusive venues in Boston. Attached was a handwritten note. "Vicky, I know we have a complicated history, but I want my sister my wedding. Please come. Emma." I stared at the invitation for hours, wondering what could have prompted this sudden outreach after 10 years of silence. Was it genuine desire for reconciliation? Political calculation by the Morrison family to ensure no family skeletons remained hidden? Or something more complex? Whatever her motivation, the timing was extraordinary. Because for the past 6 months, I had been leading an investigation into a complex money laundering and bribery scheme that connected several prominent Boston families, political figures, and business leaders. And at the center of it all was Senator William Morrison, whose son Emma was about to marry. The investigation had started when a whistleblower came forward with evidence that Morrison was using his position on the Senate Banking Committee to influence federal regulations in exchange for payments funneled through shell companies. But as we dug deeper, we discovered a web of corruption that included defense contractors, pharmaceutical companies, and real estate developers. Morrison's organization had perfected the art of political corruption, using charitable foundations, campaign contributions, and business investments to hide bribes and kickbacks. They had influence over judges, prosecutors, and regulatory officials throughout New England. The evidence was almost complete. We were perhaps 2 weeks away from arrests and indictments that would shatter Boston's political establishment. And now Emma was marrying into the family that I was about to destroy. I called Agent Chen, who had become something of a surrogate mother to me over the years, to discuss the ethical implications. "You should recuse yourself from the Morrison investigation," she said immediately when I showed her the invitation. "This creates an obvious conflict of interest." "The investigation is nearly complete," I argued. "And my personal connection doesn't change the evidence." "No, but it could compromise the case if defense attorneys argue you had a vendetta against the Morrison family." We discussed it for hours, weighing professional obligations against personal complications. Finally, we reached a compromise. I would attend the wedding as Victoria Blackwood, private citizen and Emma's sister. The investigation would continue under Agent Chen's supervision. I would make no attempt to gather evidence at the wedding or use the occasion for law enforcement purposes. But I would bring copies of the key evidence files. Not to present them publicly, but to have them available if Emma asked questions about her future family that I felt ethically obligated to answer. For a week, I debated whether to actually attend. The smart choice was to stay away, to let Emma marry into corruption while I maintained my professional distance. But something inside me needed to see her again, to understand why she was reaching out after so many years of silence. I made careful preparations. I purchased an expensive black dress appropriate for a society wedding, made appointments for hair and makeup, and reserved a room at the Fairmont Copley Plaza. I arranged for a colleague to know my itinerary and check in with me regularly. The night before the wedding, I sat in my apartment surrounded by case files and old family photographs. I packed the essential Morrison evidence into a slim briefcase, enough to prove their crimes without compromising the ongoing investigation. As I prepared for bed, my phone rang with an unknown Boston number. "Hello." I answered cautiously. "Victoria?" "It's Emma." My sister's voice, older but unmistakably familiar, sent a shock through me.
"Emma."
"I wasn't sure you'd actually call. I wanted to make sure you got the invitation. And to say thank you for agreeing to come." "I haven't agreed to anything yet," I said carefully. "But you're here, aren't you? In Boston." I hesitated, unsure how she could know that. "How did you?" "I hired someone to find you years ago," she admitted. "I know you work for the FBI. I know you've been successful. I'm proud of you, Vicky." The use of my childhood nickname caught me off guard. "Are you?" "I know I didn't support you back then. I was young and scared, and I chose the easy path. But I've grown up since then. I understand things I didn't understand at 18. "Like what?" A long pause. "Like the fact that you were right about Dad. About everything." The next morning, I dressed carefully in my black sheath dress and pearls, styled my hair in a sophisticated updo, and applied makeup that emphasized the green eyes I had inherited from my mother. The woman in the mirror looked nothing like the frightened teenager who had fled her family home a decade ago. I arrived at the Riverside Country Club early, hoping to observe the gathering without being immediately noticed. The venue was elegant and expensive, with crystal chandeliers, marble floors, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Boston Harbor. Guests in designer clothes mingled on terraces, greeted by staff offering champagne and hors d'oeuvres. I positioned myself near the back of the garden where the ceremony would take place, choosing a seat with easy access to exits. As the space filled with guests, I recognized faces from Boston society pages, politicians, business leaders, old money families whose influence shaped the city's power structure. Victoria? Victoria Blackwood. I turned to see Catherine Morrison, the senator's wife, approaching with a confused smile. She was elegant in the way that only comes from generations of wealth and privilege. "I'm Catherine Morrison, James's mother. Emma told me you might be here, but I wasn't sure." She studied my face, as if trying to reconcile the successful federal agent with her memory of the troubled teenager. "It's good to see you, Mrs. Morrison," I replied politely. "Please call me Catherine. Emma has told me so much about you. How proud she is of your career with the FBI." The irony of receiving praise for my law enforcement career from the wife of a man I was investigating for federal crimes was almost overwhelming. "I love my work. I imagine it's fascinating. James has always been interested in law enforcement, the intersection of justice and public service." Before I could respond, the wedding music began and guests took their seats. Catherine Morrison returned to the front row while I remained in the back, watching as my sister prepared to marry into a family built on the same foundation of corruption that had destroyed our own. The ceremony was beautiful and traditional. Emma looked radiant in a classic gown, her dark hair swept into an elegant chignon. James Morrison III appeared genuinely devoted to her, his expression tender as they exchanged vows. Senator Morrison officiated with a gravity befitting a man of his political stature. As I watched Emma promise to love and honor her new husband, I wondered how much she knew about the Morrison family's criminal activities. Was she genuinely innocent, or had she chosen to ignore warning signs just as she had with our father? During the transition to the reception, I kept to myself, observing the social dynamics from a distance. I noticed Senator Morrison speaking intensely with several men I recognized from our investigation, defense contractors and pharmaceutical executives who had been funneling bribes through Morrison's network. The reception began with dinner in the main ballroom. According to the seating chart, I was placed at table 8, family but not immediate family. A careful positioning that acknowledged my relationship to Emma while keeping me away from the head table where the Morrisons held court. I found myself seated with distant cousins and family friends who remembered me vaguely as the daughter who had problems. Their polite conversation revealed they knew little about my current life, seeing me as a cautionary tale rather than a success story. "So, what have you been doing with yourself, Victoria?" asked my great aunt Helen, her tone suggesting she expected to hear about struggle and failure. "I'm a federal agent," I replied simply. "Oh," she looked surprised. "How interesting. What type of cases do you work?"
Public corruption.
White-collar crime. I specialize in investigating officials who abuse their positions for personal gain. The table fell silent. Several guests exchanged uncomfortable glances, as if my career choice was somehow inappropriate for polite society. Before the conversation could continue, the wedding planner announced it was time for speeches. Senator Morrison stood first, his silver hair perfectly styled, his presence commanding even in this intimate setting. His speech was polished and political, welcoming Emma to the Morrison family while emphasizing themes of tradition, values, and public service. He spoke about his son James as the next generation of Morrison leadership, destined for great things in law and politics. "The Morrison family has always believed in service above self," he declared to appreciative applause, "in using our privileges and opportunities to make a positive difference in the world." As he spoke about integrity and public trust, I thought about the evidence files in my car. Bank records showing millions in illegal payments. Recorded conversations discussing vote buying and influence peddling. Testimony from whistleblowers who had watched the Morrison organization corrupt everything it touched. After several other speakers, Emma herself approached the microphone. She looked nervous, but determined as she surveyed the room filled with Boston's elite. "Thank you all for being here on this special day," she began. "Before I talk about my new husband and our future together, I want to acknowledge someone very important who's here tonight." My stomach dropped as I realized what was happening. My sister Victoria returned to us today, after many years apart. Some of you may remember that our family went through a difficult period when we were younger. There were misunderstandings and painful choices that separated us. The room was completely silent now, sensing drama beneath Emma's careful words. "I want to publicly acknowledge that my sister showed courage and integrity during that time, even when it cost her everything she had known. She chose to do what was right rather than what was easy or comfortable." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Several guests turned to stare at me, recognition dawning as they remembered the federal judge's daughter who had testified against her own father. Victoria has built an impressive career in federal law enforcement, specializing in cases involving corruption and abuse of power. She has dedicated her life to ensuring that people in positions of trust are held accountable for their actions. Senator Morrison's expression had shifted from polite interest to barely concealed alarm. He was exchanging urgent glances with several other men at his table. "I'm proud to call her my sister," Emma continued, "and grateful that she's here to witness this new chapter in my life." As applause filled the room, Emma gestured for me to stand. Reluctantly, I rose from my seat, acknowledging the attention with a nod. But I could feel the weight of hostile stares from people who suddenly understood exactly who I was and what I represented. When the formal speeches concluded, Emma made her way through the crowd toward my table. She looked beautiful but tense, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Can we talk privately?" she asked when she reached me. I followed her to a quiet alcove overlooking the harbor, away from the reception noise. For a moment, we stood in silence, sisters separated by 10 years of different choices and conflicting loyalties. "Why?" I asked finally. "Why invite me here? Why acknowledge me publicly?" Emma took a shaky breath. "Because I need to tell you something, and I needed witnesses to hear me say it first." "Tell me what?" "I know about the Morrison family business," she said quietly. "Not everything, but enough. The shell companies, the government contracts, the way they've bought influence throughout Boston." I felt my FBI training kick in, maintaining a neutral expression while my mind raced. "What exactly do you know?" "I know my new father-in-law has been taking bribes for years. I know he's used his Senate position to enrich himself and his friends. And I know that marrying into this family makes me complicit in their crimes." "Then why did you go through with the wedding?" Emma's eyes filled with tears. "Because I'm trapped, Vicky. Just like Mom was trapped with Dad. The Morrison family has files on everyone they've done business with, including compromising information about people in our social circle. They've made it clear that backing out of this marriage would result in certain people facing very public scandals." "What kind of information?" "Affairs, tax evasion, regulatory violations. Nothing as serious as what they're guilty of, but enough to destroy reputations and careers. They've essentially blackmailed me into this marriage." I stared at my sister, seeing our mother's trapped desperation reflected in her eyes. "Emma, you don't have to live like this. There are ways to protect yourself, legal mechanisms." "Are there?" she interrupted. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like powerful families always find ways to destroy people who threaten them. Look what happened to you when you challenged Dad. I survived. I built a better life. You were 18 and had nothing to lose," Emma replied. "I'm 31 with a career, social connections, and financial obligations I can't escape overnight." Before I could respond, James Morrison III appeared in the alcove doorway. He was handsome in the way that money and breeding often produce, but his expression was cold as he looked between us. "Emma, my father would like to speak with you. Both of you." It wasn't a request. Emma squeezed my hand briefly, then followed her new husband back toward the reception. I had a choice to make: leave immediately or face whatever confrontation the Morrison family had planned. I chose to stay. If Emma was trapped in the same cycle of corruption that had defined our childhood, perhaps I could help her find a way out. Senator Morrison was waiting in a private dining room adjacent to the main ballroom. With him were two men I recognized from our investigation, Thomas Bradley, a defense contractor, and Marcus Finch, a pharmaceutical lobbyist. Both had been channeling bribes to Morrison through shell companies for years. Agent Blackwood, Senator Morrison said as I entered, his political smile failing to mask the hostility in his eyes. Thank you for joining Emma's celebration tonight. Thank you for having me, Senator. I understand you work in public corruption investigations, he continued. Fascinating field. I imagine you encounter all sorts of conspiracy theories and wild accusations. I deal in evidence and facts, I replied evenly. Conspiracy theories generally don't hold up in federal court. No, I imagine they don't. Morrison studied me carefully. I hope you understand that your sister's happiness is very important to my family now. We wouldn't want anything to disrupt her new marriage or cause her unnecessary stress. The threat was subtle but clear. I want Emma to be happy, I said. And safe. Safety is so important, agreed Bradley. Especially in your line of work. Federal agents face many risks, don't they? From the criminals they investigate and sometimes from misunderstandings about their motivations. Are you threatening a federal officer? I asked directly. Of course not, Morrison replied smoothly. We're simply expressing concern for your well-being and Emma's peace of mind. It would be unfortunate if old family tensions were to resurface and cause problems for everyone involved. Emma stood silent beside her new husband, her face pale but determined. I realized she had maneuvered this confrontation deliberately, forcing the Morrison family to reveal their true nature in front of me. I appreciate your concern, I said, but I think you'll find that threats against federal agents tend to complicate rather than simplify family situations. Morrison's mask slipped slightly, revealing the calculating politician beneath. I'm sure you're familiar with the concept of mutually assured destruction, Agent Blackwood. Sometimes the best outcome for everyone is maintaining the status quo. And sometimes, I replied, the best outcome is bringing criminal organizations to justice regardless of their political connections. The room fell silent. Morrison, Bradley, and Finch exchanged meaningful glances while James Morrison III moved protectively closer to Emma. I think this conversation has run its course, Morrison said finally. Agent Blackwood, thank you again for attending Emma's wedding. I trust you have a safe journey home. As I prepared to leave, Emma spoke for the first time since entering the room. Victoria, she said, her voice steady despite the tension, I meant what I said in my speech. I'm proud of what you've become, and I hope we can stay in touch now that we've reconnected. I hope so too, I replied, understanding that she was communicating something beyond the surface meaning of her words. I left the Riverside Country Club that night with more questions than answers. Emma had clearly arranged for me to see the Morrison family's true nature, but I wasn't sure what she expected me to do with that knowledge. The investigation was proceeding independently of anything I had witnessed at the wedding. But 2 days later, Emma called my office and asked to meet. We met at a coffee shop in Cambridge.